Hello everyone, today is Friday, October 30th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Gwynn. Thank you for joining us today. My beverage of choice today, keeping with the trend, just water. Today, we'll be continuing what we had discussed yesterday. Are you ready to become a business? This is part 2. If you want some of the basics that we went over yesterday, feel free to take a look at that. Today, we'll be kind of continuing on that track now that we have kind of a basic the basic groundwork for it. We know yesterday we had kind of talked about some of the more basic things, understanding working capital, how to kind of get off the ground, some of the things that you need to do if you're going to register for an LLC, what kind of business you're going to be, networking. So if you want some of the topics on that, did some of the discussion on that, go back, check that out. Not really going to too much detail about today. Today we're going to kind of shift. We're going to look forward a bit now that we are at the point where we have everything set up. We're ready to start making sales. What do we do now? And I think some of the topics we'll talk about today are not necessarily logistic based, not necessarily based in numbers. It's more about things that you should be doing that are helpful to do that not everyone does. And I think that some of these things are how to put this, things that people would benefit from if they had thought about these things before they'd start their business, because a lot of things people do on the fly. They kind of wing them. So they don't necessarily have the best framework. They don't necessarily have all the basics in play. They haven't really thought these things through. And some of these things that I'll discuss are things that are worth considering, are worth thinking about, are things that you do want to plan for and be able to act accordingly when it does come into play. So one of the first things that we'll talk about is understanding the concept of unique value proposition, and why you want to have one in order to really sell your business or in order to really be able to get ahead. And the reason I think this is so important is that most people don't have a clear idea of entirely why they're doing this and what they can really do to get ahead. And to put it simply, I think that most people don't put enough emphasis on this concept of unique value proposition. So what is unique value proposition, and why is it so important? So to put it very basically, a value proposition is what you as a business are offering to your consumer. Why should someone buy your product? Why should someone endorse your small business? Why should someone come to your store and buy from you? And understanding a unique value proposition is something that would be exclusive to your store, something that you can offer that other stores don't. And I think one of the reasons why it is so difficult to get ahead in this industry, why so many stores fail, is because fundamentally they fail at this premise, is providing a unique value proposition to your customers and to your community. And to put it simply, right, if we draw this from another industry, another retail operation that a lot of small business owners get into and they ultimately fail at, is what is the unique value proposition that they offer, and why is it so important to their business? If you think about your area, wherever you live, it shouldn't matter, right? There are going to be what I can only assume to be a fairly wide array of ethnic cuisines, of restaurants, of types of businesses that all struggle to get your business. And this is difficult. This is why you see a lot of restaurants fail. Assuming most of us have normal diets and eat on a relatively normal schedule, we can only eat 3 meals a day. And for most of us, I assume that given the current state, and even before the current state, most of us weren't eating out for 3 meals a day. Most of us probably had, one meal at home. Maybe you had breakfast at home. Maybe you had dinner at home. Right? If your breakfast was just a coffee and a donut in the morning on your way to work, and then you had dinner at home, or you ate breakfast before going and your lunch was your meal out type thing, you had some number of meals at home. You're only eating 1.5, 2 meals a day out at the most. But I can only assume that unless you live in the absolute middle of nowhere, that you have more than one or two restaurants in the area. You have a ton of choices. You have a full range, presumably. I live in a suburb. I know that within, if I were to drive 10 minutes in any direction from here, I can probably hit up probably in the range of close to 30 restaurants. And there's a pretty widespread of them. I know that I can get Vietnamese food. I can get sushi. There's multiple pizzerias. Right, the list goes on and on. This isn't something that I can assume is unique to me. I assume that if you live in a suburb area or in a major city like I do, you don't really need to go far to get food. So as someone who would want to open up a restaurant in my area, if for example, if this was something I wanted to do, you have to consider, what am I up against? What can I offer to my consumers, to people who want to come to my restaurant? What can I offer to them that they can't get elsewhere? So usually, for the most part, a lot of restaurants that before they open up, they'll usually do some research. If you're already vying with a bunch of other Chinese restaurants in your area, opening up another Chinese restaurant may not be the best idea. Simply because when people have more choices, it doesn't matter the quality of those choices. It doesn't matter that one of those restaurants may be completely terrible. Any amount of customers that restaurant draws is ultimately going to be someone that draws away from your restaurant if you have Chinese as well. And in the bigger scale of things, like we mentioned, I have 30 restaurants within a 10-minute drive of me. Any one of those restaurants is going to be competing for my business because I have so many choices to choose from. So the restaurants I would ultimately choose are something that I would pick things that are valuable to me. Part of it would be menu selection, what they serve, how clean they are. These are all things that are important in the restaurant industry that they have to be able to sell me on. And part of those things is if they do have to offer something unique, in which most cases would be they're going to be the only X type cuisine in your area. Maybe there's only one Chinese restaurant in your area. Maybe there's only one Thai restaurant in your area, etc. They offer something that is unique that puts them ahead of the curve with the rest of their contenders. At the end of the day, they may still be competing with other restaurants, but they know that if they are the only one of that type of restaurant in your area and you want that food, you'll have no choice but to go to them. For game stores, this becomes much tougher. And I want you to think about this. Take a moment and think about the game stores in your area, or maybe if you travel to events, maybe if you moved around some, think about the different game stores that you have in your area. If you break it down, fundamentally, what is different that sets any one of those stores apart from one another? Because in this industry, as local game store owners, as retail owners, as people who sell online, how can you really differentiate yourself from anyone else? And this is something that becomes much more difficult. Sure, we can think about qualities that make a game store better than another game store. Maybe you can think about one game store that is very clean. They keep their bathrooms clean. They keep their tables clean. They wash and wipe down their tables. They're organized. Right? These are all different things that we can think about a store being better than a different store. But in order for a store to provide something that is truly unique, that is not something I have come across very often in this industry. And trust me when I say this, I have been to a lot of game stores. I've been to a lot of game stores in many different states, in many different cities. When I was traveling to Grand Prix, I usually made a concerted effort to talk to locals, people who lived in the area, and say, hey, what do you think is the best game store in your area if I only had time to visit one game store? And most of the times I would listen to locals and I would go out and look at what they deem to be the best game store. And for the most part, to give an honest opinion, most of the game stores that people definitively qualified as being a good game store did meet that criteria. A lot of them checked the same boxes. A lot of them had a lot of overlap with other places that I would define as being a good game store. A lot of them met the criteria of being clean. They were large. They were bright. They were well organized. It was easy to find product. It was aesthetically appealing. I could walk in, look around, and say, this place looks nice. They usually had good fixtures, they had comfortable chairs, they had a wide open play space. People didn't really have to feel like they were crammed into too small of a space for what they were trying to do. These were all things that, again, met my criteria for being a good game store. But I can think of maybe a very small handful of stores that I would say offered something that was unique from what I saw. Because as being a retail industry, most of what we do is kind of the same general rehash that most game stores offer, right? You kind of, if you go into your game store and you look around and you think, what does a game store look like? Well, I should expect to see shelves, I should expect to see board games, various things that they sell. Usually they have a counter, they have glass display cases where they put out their singles for display, and then behind the counter they usually have the more valuable things. They usually would stock things like booster packs, sleeves, deck boxes, etc. All these different things for their various games. Depending on how many games they sell, they would be stocking things like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe there's some other sports games, etc. These aren't things that that would be foreign to anyone. These are concepts that I assume you, as a consumer, if you've been inside a game store, these are things that would be familiar to you. So the stores that I think have been the most successful, the ones that I've walked into and have truly been wowed by, this is, again, trying to offer something that is unique. Their unique value proposition is trying to take your traditional retail game store setting, your traditional group of people who open up game stores, and trying to put their own twist on it so that when you walk in, you can see that this is not your typical game store. They have an edge. They are doing something that is different, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to, depending on your area, I know my area, I have a game store that is probably about 15-minute drive away. If I were to drive into downtown Portland, the New Mox boarding house is there. They're on the west side of the river. If I go further east, towards the east side, then going on the east side, there are a few other game stores as well. Those are probably about 30 minutes away from me. As a store owner, if you're looking to start a business and you can't say, how can I provide something that is unique to my consumers, you're going to lose to these stores that have been there longer. They're more successful. They have more money. They have something that will always put them ahead of you. And simply that's the virtue of them being there first. There's a reason why we've seen a lot of, if you think about business as a whole, if you think about some of the other some other industries that we look at, how many eBay lookalikes exist out there? How many auction sites exist where they basically market as, hey, come onto our platform, sell your stuff, we'll take a fee, and then you can sell it? How many of those have existed and failed over the years? Does it matter that any of those are necessarily better than eBay? Not really. eBay was there first, and they have the luxury of being the first one to do that. And people will always go back and think about, I want an online auction-based platform for me to buy and sell goods, I'm going to think about eBay first. It doesn't matter if anything pops up now that is better than eBay, because eBay was there first. They have to overcome that massive barrier, kind of that massive hill, in order to compete. And as a game store, you're going to be on the same boat. If you cannot offer something that is unique, that really sets yourself apart, you're going to have a hard time fitting in with some of these other game stores. Because let's be honest, as hobbyists, as people who are probably my age group, at the end of the day, I know a lot of people had trouble kind of getting themselves to go to F&M, because F&M, or whatever tournaments have you, what does it come down to? At the end of the week, it's Friday, it's the beginning of the weekend. Do I really want to go out, take time out of the day, and go to a game store, or go to my local game store and play Magic for a few hours, or play cards for a few hours? Because proximity is usually the easiest, and this is what most people go by. It doesn't matter that that store that's further away is going to have better deals, is necessarily cleaner, is objectively what you would call a better store. Not necessarily. Most people simply will just choose, this is the closest option, I'm just going to go there. And again, this is why I hammer the concept of a unique value proposition. If you want to offer something that your customer cannot get at a closer store, then you are going to be struggling. You're going to already be fighting an uphill battle because you are basically losing a portion of your consumer base, of your potential consumer base, to another store by the simple virtue that that customer is going to be closer to that store than your store. Online, it becomes even tougher. Online, when you think about TCG player sellers, when you think about people who you buy from and sell to on Facebook, everyone else at that is ultimately kind of one of many in a relatively faceless crowd. Is there really any difference between this TCG seller and this other one? Usually there isn't. Feedback is kind of a good way to look at them, but generally when you think about stores who have been in business for a long time, who are probably some of the bigger power sellers, 50K feedback, 25K feedback, 10K feedback, you kind of get a point when they become relatively homogenized and they really aren't that different than one another. So when you start selling online, it's one of the things that I can recommend is if you're brand new to selling online, one of the things I would recommend to you as a small business owner, as for someone who is looking to make the transition, go out and purchase products on TCG Player, purchase products from different stores, and see what they do. Sure, we've all purchased from Card Kingdom before, or Troll and Toad before, Star City, Channel Fireball, etc. TCG Player. Go out and order from these people. Order a range of product. Order a small a playset of commons that will cost $1, and you pay 78 cents shipping on. Order a $50 card. Order a range and see how these people do it. See what your experience as a consumer is, and see what kind of experience you want to provide to someone who is going to be your consumer. And this is something that is important, again, because if we think back to unique value proposition, what value do you offer to someone else? Because if you're thinking about competing on the axis of price, there's always going to be someone cheaper than you. I can guarantee that there's going to be someone who has a TCG Player store. They're going to open it for the first time because they're going to sell exactly one card that they open that they just want to sell. These people have no intention of becoming a professional seller. They're not doing this long run. They don't care about their feedback. They don't necessarily care about the quality of the experience that their consumer is getting. All they want to do is sell that sweet card that they opened, which is perfectly fine. That's why TCG Player exists. That's why eBay exists. But if you are looking to go out there and make yourself a name and be someone who is going to be in the community, you want longevity and success to your business, you have to offer something that is unique to your customers. I've ordered plenty of product from TCG Player. I'm just going to use an example of some of the things I've gotten and things that I would think are good, that do well for people, and things that I think are would not work for me and I would generally avoid overall. So this was a package I received. I folded my address and I kind of blacked out the seller's address. This is a package I received that was shipped to me. So as a seller, these are things that I would avoid just looking at this address. One, the address is cut out from the invoice. This is, if you've ordered from TCG Player before, this is the top part of the invoice. They very clearly cut out this part and then taped it on, and they hand wrote their return address on here. In addition, they paid $4 to have this product shipped to me with tracking, which I'm kind of amazed that their post office was willing to have this tracked, because this kind of is a little bit too thin. This is just a plain white envelope, but somehow they managed to track this first class with shipping on it. Right, so if we break this down, why does this not work for me as a business, and what are things that I can avoid? First step, writing out your address. This is an abysmal waste of time. It's fine if you have one order a day, but can you imagine writing out envelopes for 10 orders a day, 20 orders a day, 100 orders a day? At some point, you need to do better than this. You need to find a way to get your return address onto your envelopes in a time-efficient manner. Yesterday, we kind of talked about how people use rubber stamps and they just stamp every envelope they have. To me, that's still time-consuming. All I do is, whenever I place an order for envelopes, I have them print my store name and my return address on there. It's just on every envelope I have. There are ways you can save shipping on it a little bit. I know that there are people that like to buy plain white envelopes, completely blank envelopes, and run it through a printer and print out their the return address that way, that's also acceptable. I do like having a little flair on the envelope. That way mine looks a little bit different than your regular plain white envelope that just has return address, label, and store name on it. So I do have it printed. It does cost a little bit more. It is something I will reevaluate in the future about how I do it, but that is something that works for me. Writing your return address is not something that should be acceptable on any level if you do plan on doing this in the long term. One, because logistically it opens up issues if an envelope has to be returned to you because it bounced from the customer. Then it becomes much more difficult. If there's any issues reading it, it becomes much more difficult. And it just, right, no offense to this person and their store, but their handwriting sucks. And I think you just avoid those issues by having it cleanly printed on there in some form, or even using a rubber stamp. Secondly, cutting out the address from the invoice and then taping it on here. In terms of sloppiness, it's whatever. I use windowed envelopes. And I have a way of folding the invoice so that this ship to their name and their address shows up inside the window. It's relatively easy. I don't have to worry about cutting this out. I don't have to worry about writing their shipping address. So that's the way I do it. That's why I would encourage people to do for return envelopes. I know for people who use Indicia, ShipStation, some of these more advanced softwares, they have ways of basically exporting all the orders, putting it into Indicia, ShipStation, what have you, stamps.com, and then just basically printing off stamps, and all they have to do is just slap the stamp on. That's also an acceptable way. Doing this, again, this is something that is very labor intensive. This is fine if you have 1 or 2 orders, but if you could imagine trying to cut out the top part of every invoice you have and manually taping it on for 50 orders, 100 orders, it becomes very tedious. This will cost you more money than either using windowed envelopes or just printing postage directly onto the envelope itself. Lastly, in the concept of saving money, this person paid $4 to ship this package to me. They came from, let's see, I scratched it out. I actually can't see where this came from. It looks like somewhere on the East Coast based on what the zip code says here. NE, that's Nebraska. Nebraska. So they paid $4 to have this tracked to me from Nebraska. They're overpaying substantially, even with the recent hike increase in USPS postage. They're probably overpaying by, I probably want to say, about 50 cents. If you are sending out 100 tracked orders or so, and each one you're overpaying by 50 cents on, it doesn't seem like a lot, right? But that's $50 that you could be saving simply by printing the label yourself. Use paypal.com. You can print labels that way. This saves yourself a trip to the post office. Who knows how much time and effort this person spent to get to their post office, wait in line, and then have them generate this. You can, if you haven't done it before, paypal.com, you can use multi-order shipping as a tool to directly print out postage, slap it on, and send it off. You can just drop it out front in your mailbox with the normal mail. You don't have to make a trip to the post office. And you save yourself 50 cents in addition to time and labor that cost you to make a trip to the post office. So this is just one example. This is an order, and I was able to basically poke holes at 3 things that this person did that as a business I would not want to do. I have a relatively set way in terms of shipping. One of the things that I do like to offer is with every order that goes out, I use this. This is a cardboard insert. It has a lot of the same information. It has my social media sites on here. These are the same social media sites that you would see on the right of the screen here. So this is a way for people to find. This is a way for people to find me, and it says, "Thank you for your purchase. If you have any issues, questions, concerns, or feedback with your order, please feel free to reach out to us at vermilion.pdx.sales@gmail.com, which is the email I have registered to the business." So there's several reasons to use this. One, I have my logo on the back. It is big. It is something that if you are looking to grow your business and expand your business, having a visible logo is something that you want people to see. When people see this, I have it on most of the things I use. I had table skirts printed off for when I have events. The logo is front and center. People can identify that. People will be able to see this and, in theory, be able to find me on TCG Player and eBay if they know, if they can recognize the logo. Brand recognition is something that you do want to build as a business. It is important to do if you are looking to really become a mainstay, because people need to be able to recognize you. There are ways to contact me on here. The email is on here, as mentioned, for people to reach out to me. I've had people email me asking, having requests about specific things. I've made sales through there where people reached out to me and we were basically able to come to an arrangement, doing a direct deal that way. It's easier to give people a discount when I don't have to pay fees to TCG Player, eBay, these various sites. People have reached out to me on social media because it's on here. People have found Facebook, and as a way to reach out to us, same idea. This is why it's on here, and that's why this is printed front and back. And the last advantage to this, and this is something that has come up before, believe it or not, is this goes inside every order. It doesn't matter if it's a plain white envelope or if it is an order that gets sent with shipping. This is relatively sturdy cardboard. It doesn't look that way, but it is reasonably sturdy. Putting these inside plain white envelopes gives it a bit of rigidity. The envelope doesn't feel quite as flimsy. This is an example of one order I had received. I'm gonna try and cover my address here. This is kind of how it came. You can see that the card was taped towards the end here, kind of taped towards the end here, and there was basically nothing on this end of the envelope, so this end of the envelope got kind of bent and torn up. And as a result, the cards I received, they also weren't shipped with a top loader. They came in, they just had a piece of cardboard taped to it. So the cards came bent. This is something I had to deal with. So fairly frustrating that this was the case. So I avoid this by taping the top loader, the card inside the top loader, and the team bag to this insert. It gives it a little bit more rigidity so the envelope isn't quite flopping around. And when I send an order that is tracked, I actually fold this up and put it around the invoice, so there's another layer of protection. I have gotten people who have messaged me and said that by doing this, it actually protected the inside card when the envelope got chewed up. So this is a benefit. This cost me, I want to say, about 8 cents when I had them printed off. I didn't buy as many as I should have because I wasn't sure the direction that I was going to go with the logo and the front. It's possible I will likely order more in the future when doing this. So this isn't something that is mandatory, but I do think that the utility of this, I'm happy to pay an additional 8 cents per order for every order that goes out in order to have these inside. And this is, and a lot of people have responded well. I do write their name, so thank you for your purchase, Edward. If I were to buy it, for example, I write out their name on here. It is a nice personal touch. If it is a name that I recognize when shipping out orders who have ordered from us before, I usually say thank you for your repeat business. A lot of people also appreciate the fact that they're being acknowledged by the business, that I appreciate them choosing to buy from me, because I know that repeat business, this is something that you look for. You want people who can come back to you over and over again. This is something that you strive for, because a lot of times, a lot of places, it's usually a one and done type thing. Providing your customers a compelling reason for them to come back and buy from you is going to be something that will be beneficial to you in the long run. So when you're selling online, and I try and put this out there, think of the way you're going to be selling your card. Think of how you're going to pack the order, because when you sell to someone, it is important for you to put yourself in their mindset. Put yourself in the mindset of a consumer. And this is why I encourage people to go out and buy products from various online stores, use TCG Player, buy from 50K sellers, see what they're doing that may work for you. And it is important to remember that at the end of the day, you have to answer to your customers. If your customers aren't happy, it is going to be something that is going to hurt your business overall. Most of the time, it is very, very hard to get repeat buyers to your business, because on TCG Player, as a third-party site, everyone is relatively faceless. The only real difference we have is a number by our name that tells us how much feedback we have and how many sales we've done. Trying to get people to come back is going to be something that will be beneficial for you in the long run. When you are sending something out, put yourself in the mindset of the customer. Think, would you be happy to receive this product? If I got this order in the mail, packaged the way I'm sending it, is this something that I find acceptable? Am I putting enough protection on it to make sure that the card doesn't get damaged? Clearly, cardboard and jamming them inside, this doesn't work. You have bent cards, and this is something I'm pretty annoyed by. When we talk about the price difference, is it something that is unfortunate that top loaders are expensive as they are? Absolutely, but that's the cost of business. This is something that you have to accept. This is something you have to take on as a business owner, because you want your customers to be happy. You want them to receive a product that you would be happy receiving yourself. How many of us can think of times, I would have hoped that's everyone, where we've gotten something and it was damaged in the mail because it wasn't properly packaged? You want to be able to hold that same standard that of how you want to receive products onto your customer. And this is something that seems relatively trivial, seems relatively elementary, but a lot of business owners miss out on this because they just simply look at ways where you cut costs. How can I make more money by cutting a corner here or there? And then when you do that, this is something that happens. You have cards that arrive bent, you have an annoyed customer. This is something that is going to hurt you down the line. And I know for a fact that I'm going to put this is a store. These cards came from a 25K feedback seller. They had more than 25,000 sales. They are an established brick and mortar store. I'm going to put the store on the blacklist, and I will not be buying from the store again because this isn't worth the headache. Granted, we're not talking about very expensive cards, right? I just bought 4 uncommons, 4 Undercity Informers here. These cards arrive bent, and this is something that I have to deal with. Is it worth my time to argue with them about this? No, but imagine if this wasn't me, if this was someone who was legitimately upset by the cards they'd received as a result. I can't be the only one that they ship cards like this to, and cards arrive damaged. I can only imagine that this is something that would be somewhat recurring, given the nature of how they had packed their cards. If they're going to have upset people, it was worth the time and energy to just buy top loaders to ship these cards properly the first time to begin with. And this is why, as I mentioned previously, I keep repeating myself over and over again. Buy from these people, see what they're doing, how they ship their cards, and think, is this an acceptable form? Because most people go with the bare minimum. I think the bare minimum is fine, as long as the cards aren't being damaged when they arrived. You have to figure out what percentage of error you're willing to accept. It's going to happen. I can assure you that when you send enough packages, when you send thousands of orders out, you are going to have packages that will get damaged, mail that gets damaged. That's a reality of the situation. But if you're not doing enough to minimize that risk, then I think you are doing yourself and ultimately the customer a disservice, because you're not doing what you can to ensure that your order arrives to them in the condition that it should have. Another way that I think is pretty important for people before they get into business is finding ways to maximize their dollar, to really stretch their dollar, and to be able to maximize their time. So a lot of these are kind of your mileage may vary type things, but in terms of stretching your dollar, I think a lot of people can save themselves money by buying in bulk. These inserts I had bought, I believe when I first started, I bought about 5,000 of them. Depending on how I want to edit it, my next iteration, I'll probably be looking at buying probably about 25 to 50,000 of them. It's a one-time purchase. Is it a lot of money up front? Sure. But I'd rather get it done, get it out of the way, and save 1 or 2 cents. If you think 8 cents doesn't seem like much, but if I can save 1 cent, if I can cut the cost down to 7 cents on 10,000, I'm saving $100. Does it seem like much? Not really, but when you start thinking about all the ways that things cost you money, envelopes cost you money, these cost money, top loaders cost money, sleeves cost money, yada yada. Once you go and think about these ways and you save you money, it starts to add up. Once you are buying things in bulk, if you can afford to do so, it will save you money in the long run. And again, small things don't seem like much, but when you can think about every expense that you incur, if you are able to save a little bit of money on each of those expenses, it will add up into a non-trivial amount as time goes on. So that's simply one way to stretch your money. Another way to stretch your money is use credit card rewards. Sign up for a business credit card if you don't do so, if you haven't done so already, and utilize that credit card in ways that fit your needs. I bank with Chase for my business. Chase is something that is easily accessible. There are a lot of Chases. There are Chases in every city. Every event I've been to, there's been a Chase that's been relatively close. I believe, I want to say it was Indianapolis. We stayed at a hotel. I had a Chase that was less than a minute walk away. It was easy enough for me to go there and do my business with them, to bank, to make a deposit, to withdraw cash, to get small bills for an event. Yeah, this was super convenient. This is why I use Chase. Are they, morality aside, there are better banks. You can probably use a credit union, what have you, but I do like the convenience that Chase offers. I also use 2 of their credit cards. One credit card is a flat 1.5% cash back on everything. That means for every $100 you spend, they are basically giving you 1.5% back, $1.5. It doesn't seem like much, but again, when we are talking about things in the context of saving money, of being able to stretch your dollar, for every dollar you spend, you're getting 1.5 cents back. $100, $1.5, $1,000, $15, $10,000, $150. These numbers add up, and I can assure you that for most businesses out there, spending $10,000 is a drop in the bucket. If you're spending $100,000, that's $1,500 back. These are all things that will add up, and when you think about all the ways that you have saved money by doing these things, by maximizing your dollar, you can look back and think, this is a very, very decent amount of money I've saved by doing this. And if you're in this for a long haul, if you're looking for longevity in your business, and if you're really looking to grow your business, these small things add up, and they have a very, very clear value to doing them. And doing them early, when your business is still in infancy, is going to be productive for you in the long run. When I say maximize your time, what do I mean? There are a lot of ways to do this. One of the things I think is most valuable that a lot of people overlook, and I know a lot of game stores overlook on this, is you want to be investing in the right people. Without going too much into politics and morality and ethics of this, I don't think that people should be paid a minimum wage. I think people should make more than that. You have to understand and help people appreciate the value of the work that they do. If they feel like they're being fairly compensated for what they're doing, if they are in a position where they can think, man, I like my job, I like going to work, I like what I do, I think what I do matters, what I do is productive, what I do is helpful and will grow their business. If you can get that into the minds of your employees, of your staff, of people you hire, your business will ultimately be more successful. Currently, I don't have any employees. I don't think I'm at the point where there is enough work that I can't do myself. A lot of it does take a point. I'm getting very, very close to getting to the point where I do need an employee, but I would not hire anyone for minimum wage. I would want to make sure that they're making well above minimum wage, and the work that they do, again, as I mentioned, is something that is productive. They don't feel like they're wasting their time. They're happy with the amount of work they're making, or they're happy with the amount of money they're making, and the work that they do is something that matters to them. When you have people that make minimum wage, we see this. There's no shortage of people out there who make minimum wage. This is the unfortunate reality of the world we live in. They're dissatisfied with their job. They think their job sucks. They hate going to work every day, and their performance suffers. They do the bare minimum that they can to get by. I'm sure we can identify with plenty of people who do exactly what it takes to keep their job and not a bit more. I think that is a very, very lousy mentality. It is something that is detrimental to the worker. It is something that is going to be detrimental to the company in the long run. As a small business, you don't have a lot of employees that you'll go through. Most stores, from what I see, you're looking at people that operate with the owner operator. They have themselves. They spend most of their time working. You have 1 to 2 other employees. Some of the bigger stores, we're looking at maybe 10 employees total. There's not a lot of employees to go around. So being able to take care of your staff making sure that they're happy with what they do, with what they make, is going to be something that is going to help grow your business in the long run. And this is a way that maximizes your time. And maximizing your time is valuable because it allows you to focus on things that are relevant to you. And you want to be in a position where you can say, hey, I need you to go do this task or work on this project, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter if it's simple, if it's big. You need to be able to trust them to do that job correctly so that you can put your time and energy into focusing on the things that will matter to you and that will ultimately grow your business. And if your employee is someone that you're paying minimum wage and they can see that, okay, I have to do this, I have to do whatever it takes to get it done as quickly as possible so I can move on to something else, you're not going to get a good job out of it. And if you, at the end of the day, you have to go back, you have to start dealing with customer service issues, you have to go deal with their mistakes, that's going to cost you more money, that's going to cost you more energy, that's going to cost you more time than if you had just paid someone slightly more to get a better employee, to get someone who values their work, who values their job, takes pride in what they do, and does the job right. Building the right infrastructure is also something that is important. A lot of places suffer because they're disorganized. They don't have the proper techniques in place. They don't have the proper procedures in place to do things that are efficient and that are productive. And a lot of times this is something as simple as having a clean, organized workspace. You want to have workflow that makes sense. You can't think about this from the perspective of a business owner. Think about this from an employee's perspective. If I had to go through and I had to do a set of tasks, right? A, B, C, and D. You want to, and they have to be done in that specific order. We can use this, a very good example of this is listing cards. If you're an online business and you sell things online, what is the step that most people do? Most people would grade a card, list a card, sort a card, put it away, and then when it comes time for orders to be pulled. Having a very set procedure, having your stock be organized makes it easy for people to put things away, makes it easier for people to find orders, to pull orders when they're selling, when cards are being sold. Listing cards, grading cards, this is something that should be done very quickly. You want to have people that have the proper know-how. When you have cards that are incorrectly graded, this creates customer service issues down the line. These are things that you generally want to avoid. I think this is a step that fundamentally a lot of game stores do fail at. A lot of businesses do fail at because they're not creating the right workflow. They're not making the task as efficient as possible in order to minimize the amount of time that it takes them to do this. And by doing it efficiently, it's going to cost you more time, which in the end will cost you more money. Without going into too much details there, I think having that correct infrastructure in place is going to be something that in the long run will be beneficial for a lot of stores. And this is something that store owners, I would encourage people to review their process, make sure that it's good, it makes sense. It may make sense to you is important, but if your employees are doing it, and I would take note of what they have to say, you want to make sure that they're comfortable giving you feedback, that if you are able to have someone else provide their opinion, hey, how can this be done better? Does this workflow, does doing A, B, C, D make sense to you? Or maybe should we be doing it in a different step? Maybe B before A may make sense. Granted, that's not always possible with sorting cards, with listing cards, for example, because things do kind of have to be done in that relatively set order. But is there something that can be done? Can something be done better? Is there a logistical part to this that makes more sense that would improve the workflow? These are ways that you can maximize your time. And if you are looking to grow your business long term, if you're looking to maximize the longevity of your business, understanding how these processes work and getting the correct infrastructure in place is something that will be beneficial to you. Lastly, at the beginning of your business, ironically enough, one of the things that I think most people completely fail to take into account and neglect to do is think about their exit strategy. It's really strange to think about. It's really strange to think about, why would I think about my exit strategy when I'm starting my business? And I think that is the very, very, very reason why a lot of people aren't necessarily as successful as they are. One, it is important to note, if you have an exit strategy, that means you have a long-term plan. If you are a store owner, and I say, what is your exit strategy? And you know, hey, this is what it takes for me to get out. If I build a store, if I get my business up to a point and someone is happy to pay me $1 million for everything, that's an end goal. That's a perfectly acceptable end goal. Maybe some people find that point to be successful to them. They say that if they can grow their business up to that point and they can sell to someone else for $1 million, that's an exit strategy. Maybe some people will just say, I want to get to a point where this business is able to run and operate on its own, and I can collect a paycheck. I can collect passive income from this business because it is successful enough to operate independently and be able to pay me without me having to be here all the time, hands-on. That's another exit strategy. These are things that people don't put enough weight into. And to me, I think this is particularly concerning for most store owners, because when people say they don't have an exit strategy, to me, that indicates that they don't have a long-term plan. It's easy enough when you're starting out a business. It's easy enough to see this is where the business is going to be in a month. This is where the business is going to be in 6 months. This is, if you're looking at a longer-term goal, maybe, hey, I want to try and get to a break-even point at the end of the first year, which we know is a very successful business. Most businesses, as we discussed yesterday, do look at operating losses for the first year because their startup costs are too high. Maybe in a year, you're looking to completely break even on your business and just not be looking at the red because your startup costs are too high. That's a perfectly acceptable goal. But when you start asking people, okay, where do you see the business in 3 years? Where do you see business in 5 years? Where do you see the business in 10 years? If they can't answer that, if they don't have an exit strategy, I think that's a problem, because that indicates lack of foresight. That indicates lack of people who are unable to think about something long term. Maybe some people are happy. Maybe there are people out there who want to be game store owners for life. I definitely know there's no shortage of those people. Those people love what they do, and they think that work for themselves, they enjoy doing it. They don't mind doing it. This is something that they can do for the rest of their life. More power to them. You should still have an exit strategy. There may be a point when maybe someone offers you the right amount of money and you're happy to take that money, sell your business, and move on. We see this on all levels. A lot of startups, they become successful and they sell their startup, they sell their company to someone else, and they take that money and they reinvest, they move on to a different project. An exit strategy, ironically, is something that you should have in place at the very beginning of your business. Without getting too personal, I've mentioned this before. A lot of people look at me and they say, hey, what are you looking to do long term? And I've told people that one of my goals in life, one of my passions in life is philanthropy, it's medicine. I'll go on to be a doctor someday. Doing this is simply a means to that end. I don't want to do this forever. I would like to see the business grow. I would like to grow my business up to a point where it becomes turnkey. I'm able to maybe passively collect a check from it, or maybe I'm able to get to a point where the business is of the right size and I can just sell the business and then I can just go on, pay for medical school, and move on. These are things that I evaluate at the very beginning. This is my exit strategy. This is my plan. This is my long-term plan. This is something that I've established very, very clear terms for as to what I want to do in the long run. And I will reiterate this again for the last time. As a business owner, have an exit strategy. Figure out what is the criteria that would end this business for you. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the business. If it means selling your business, all that means is that the business will continue to operate. You're no longer the owner. It's no longer under your control. It's no longer in your possession. You've sold it to someone else. That's perfectly fine. Have an exit strategy. Have the foresight to plan for something long term if this is something you're looking to do long term. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the rest of your life. It is something that you want to do for the rest of your life. Have a plan for that. Have these things in place. Do so at the beginning. Do not think about it towards the end. And this is something that I cannot stress enough for people. Lastly, it is important to identify that there will be factors that are beyond your control. This is a reality situation. This is not something we can control. Have a contingency plan. This kind of ties in with the exit strategy. Do have not necessarily an exit plan, but a plan where if things start to go south, what do you do? A lot of businesses close. We see more businesses, small businesses have closed this year than in the past many years. A lot of businesses have not necessarily failed, but they simply could not adapt to the current stage. They weren't able to find what was going to work for them, what changes they need to make, and it hurt them. At the end of the day, we see businesses going bankrupt, we see business closing. This is an unfortunate reality. It is important to note that you're facing a very, very uphill battle when you first start out, and that there will be factors beyond your control. Sometimes you can do your absolute very best, you can do things right, and sometimes things just don't plan out for you. If we're looking back to October of last year, would any of us have thought that we were going to be in a pandemic in 2020? Absolutely not. But here we are. It has completely changed the face of what we do. And if you're growing your business, you have to be able to plan for these things. We can't always have years that are going to be on the up and up. I'm sure that many of us who operate for a long period of time will look at quarters, we'll look at years where we operate in the red simply because we did not meet the goals, we did not meet expectations. There are things that just didn't pan out. We didn't grow the business the way we wanted to. These are all factors that you had some level of control over, but that you can't control everything. You can't get people to come to your store if you have a poor location. Is that something you can change? Sure. Is that something that's going to be necessarily viable for you to do? Absolutely not. It is just something that you have to come to terms with, and that as a small business owner, you have to be willing to accept. And you can't always necessarily beat yourself up over it. It is unfortunate. I know that there are a lot of owners out there whose livelihood is dependent on this, depending on how successful their business is, dependent on how successful their store is. But at the end of the day, have an exit plan and know that sometimes things just won't go right for you. It is an unfortunate reality. It's not something that people want to hear. Most people don't start businesses with the assumption, operating under the fact that my business might fail someday, but you have to accept it. This is something that if you do things right, the best you can do is try and mitigate this loss, mitigate the chances of having catastrophic failure, of mitigate the chances that your business will go bankrupt or your business will have to close. But again, who of us would have seen a pandemic coming in 2020? This is something that most people probably don't plan for. It is likely that if we do see an economic recession, I would expect to see a lot more game stores, a lot more businesses close. This is an unfortunate reality of it, but you have to do what you can to mitigate these outcomes. You have to have good processes, good infrastructure. If you have good employees, these are all things that will help you in the long goal. And when you're planning for your business, plan for the short, plan for 1, 3, 6 months at a time, but you have to remember that 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's a long time to pass, and a lot of things can change in that time. And a lot of those things you can't always control. That's the reality of it. So I realized that today's episode, a lot of these things are a little bit more out there, a lot of things that may not necessarily line up with what people think about in terms of a business when starting out, in terms of numbers, how much working capital I need to start, what should be paying, what should be selling, how much do I plan on making. These are all things that I promise you will come together with time. I do plan on having another episode. I do probably want to try and reach out to a few people to have them interviewed about how they started their business, how their business is going, kind of some of the trials and tribulations they had along the way. I think those are all invaluable because if you are starting out as a small business, one of the best things you can do, and I mentioned this yesterday, is you want to network with people and you want to learn where they failed so you don't have to go through those same growing pains and same failures that they do. And that is probably among the best things that I would encourage that people do, and something people should consider if it is something that they want to do long term. So with that, that'll kind of wrap up today's episode. As mentioned, this is part of a series. This is part 2. Part 1 was yesterday on Thursday, October 29th. Go back and take a look at that. If you want to, if you have any questions about anything I say, please reach out to me. I'm not necessarily looking to my own horn here, but I have seen quite a bit. I know I've seen a lot of stores. I've been in this for a while. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I'm not saying I'm the best. There are things that I don't know. There are things that I can be perfectly honest in saying that I'm more than happy to get someone else's opinion to take a look at and have them help me, because I simply don't know the answer to everything. And there are things that businesses have gone through that I haven't gone through yet. And that is likely going to be a level of growing pains that I will have to experience down the line. So again, feel free to reach out. If you have questions, put them in comments. As always, I can be reached out on Twitter at nwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Part 3 and 4, they may come down the line. I think I may look to separate some of those as probably interviews to see where I can get some people in to provide their input on this. So those will come in line. It is Halloween tomorrow, so happy Halloween, everyone, wherever you are. Celebrate Halloween in the way that makes sense to you. Do so safely. I always encourage people, wherever you're in the world, stay safe. Happy Halloween. That's it for the week. It is the weekend, so we will be back here next week again on Monday. Thank you all for listening. As always, enjoy the content. Enjoy